In video game development, pre-production is the initial planning phase, which focuses on creating core concepts, writing initial design documents, creating prototypes, planning the development pipeline, and deciding on as well as building tools required to produce the game and content. Whether you're working in a big AAA studio or want to create a custom map for your favorite game, the right preparation early on can help you save a lot of time down the line and also helps improve the overall quality of your creations. Let's look at 4 key steps you should go through before starting to design and plan your environments. Step 1. Know your game. Whichever type of game you're making levels for, it's crucial to know your game inside and out to be able to make quality content for it. Let's take Valve's Left 4 Dead 2 as an example here. It's best to start with the game's high concept, which is a very brief answer to the question, what is the game about? To which I'd say, Left 4 Dead 2 is a replayable survivor horror game where 4 survivors cooperate to escape environments swarming with zombies. You should also have a good understanding of your game's core mechanics, or put differently, what does your player do in the game? In Left 4 Dead 2, movement and shooting are at the heart of things. You should build a good understanding of the different types of weapons and in which situations and environment types they are most effective. Also, how does your player traverse the environment? Is there vaulting and climbing? Can the player crouch or slide under narrow gaps? Additionally, what are the types of enemies that your player can face in the game? What are the key enemy behaviors and abilities, and how do they react to the environment? The boomer, for example, explodes when damaged, covering nearby players with boomer bile, which attracts hordes of zombies. This negates player behavior of simply shooting at everything that moves. Understanding the threats your player can face is important in crafting interesting playable spaces around them. When working on a collaborative game project in this stage, things like core mechanics and enemy types might not be fleshed out yet and will need to be designed, prototyped and iterated on over time. Level design can assist here by creating test maps for specific mechanics and combat encounters, allowing other departments to quickly hop into the game and test out their changes in a controlled environment. Step 2. Know your audience. To be able to inform your design decisions, it's important to have a good understanding of your target audience, or in other words, who are the people that will be playing your game. As a side note, ideally, plenty of people outside your key target audience can also pick up and enjoy the game, but keeping too broad of a demographic in mind and trying to cater to everyone often results in something bland and not really enjoyable for anyone. For example, you don't want some areas of the game to have hyper-complex puzzle segments, while others are so simple that they're not really a puzzle at all. And when your audience is more interested in action, don't force them to sit through extensive dialogue to be able to progress in the game. In short, get an understanding of what your core audience wants and expects out of your game and try to deliver that experience as well as you can. Step 3. Know your tools. Whether you're working in a custom map editor or one of the mainstream game engines like Unreal or Unity, you should have a good knowledge of all tools and steps required to prototype, implement and polish your level before you actually start working on it. This not only helps with scheduling and scope, but also allows you to spot possible bottlenecks in development before they happen. When working within a larger team, this is the ideal time to reflect on a toolset based on project needs and experience from the past project, and suggest improvements and new features for the tools you're working with. When building a custom map for, let's say, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, you will have a fairly extensive library of assets to work with. Having a decent knowledge of what is available for you to work with helps decide on a possible setting and theme, instead of being halfway finished with your map, only to realize you lack the required assets to flesh out the visuals. When you're working on a larger game project, you might not have any assets available during the pre-production stage. This is when you might want to schedule in some time to construct a set of placeholder and prototype assets to help you build your early prototype levels, or request a set of white box assets from the art department. Now imagine having spent 3 months of work carefully building this level that revolves around a large-scale battle, only to realize in playtests that the game is way too laggy on target devices. This is why it's important to get a good sense of the technical limitations of the toolset and project before you start development. For example, how many units can you make use of at the same time before you start running into performance issues? How does terrain affect your unit movement, and to which boundaries can you push it before it starts causing problems? And how does unit scale affect readability in your environments? In StarCraft's lore, the Ultralisk is gigantic compared to other units and structures. Early on in the development of StarCraft 2, the devs decided it needed to be heavily scaled down, because if it were closer to its true size, the Ultralisk would take up too much screen space and block vision of other units. Basically, you want to spend as much time with the toolset as possible, get to know its ins and outs, and try to push the limits to see where you start running into problems. Step 4. Dimensions and scale. When you have a good sense of what your core mechanics are, you should set up standardized measurements for your environments. How high can a player jump? Set up a fixed height for ledges and objects that you want a player to be able to jump on, and make sure other objects and map segments are clearly higher to avoid the player not being sure whether or not they can jump on top of something. The same goes for jumpable gaps in your level. If a gap is exactly the length of your jump distance, it's easy for the player to mess up, and if it's only slightly larger, players might think it can be jumped over, resulting in frustrating death that doesn't feel like it's their fault. The same rules about fixed measurements apply for mechanics like climbing and vaulting. You will also want to get a good sense of the character movement speed and how long it takes to traverse specific distances. Whether you're setting up a puzzle or fight sequence where exact timing is important, or you're trying to make sure the pacing feels right when traversing larger sections of your game world, having a good sense of scale early on will help you avoid having to rework entire sections of your environments later down the line. These 4 steps should help you prepare more effectively for whichever project you're designing levels for. But as each and every project is different, stay mindful of what is most relevant for what you're working on and adjust your pre-production accordingly. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.